Sage when the Oracle enters power. Now, if you follow the channel, I've been talking about this unimpressed Oracle and these Oracles in general. And I went pretty deep in talking about Erica Sinclair from Stranger Things and some other characters that kind of mimic her. And someone made the mistake of mentioning Sage. So I had to talk about Sage, which actually comes at a good time because I was going to start getting back into the the boys' characters, kind of doing some deeper profiles. So she's perfect for this. And since we've been on Oracles, we might as well dig into her because this is a difference. She is this Oracle archetype that we've talked about. And she's a very special character because she isn't just the smartest person in the room. She's the smartest person in the world, and a world that only values intelligence when it can be aimed, monetized, and plausibly denied. So she feels like a really grown up, institutionalized version of the unimpressed Oracle type. She's the truth seer who doesn't flinch, who doesn't emote, who doesn't beg the room to catch up. But this is where the shift matters. And we talked about context. Now, I talked about Erica, 2D, and D. And the difference is mainly being that 2D and D had the luxury of being in very domestic comedy settings for this character to excel. Erica was this character plopped into this cosmic horror setting in a 80s environment. Now Sage is propped into this exact same character arc, but she's operating from inside of the power structure. So that key shift between her makes her feel so differently. But she is that same character, but now she's on this side of the fence, right? She would be on the Vecna side of the fence. And when you see this character, all of a sudden you lose that strategically as an ally, and she defects to the other side. You're like, uh-oh, right? Vecna armed with an Erica might have been even more dangerous. We have to be really honest because she could have cut through a lot of the patterns and things that he missed. But this is where that character really starts to diverge. In myth, oracles typically never rule. They warn rulers about what will happen. So this modern system doesn't want prophecy in that way. It wants predictions. So Sage doesn't speak truth because it's right. She speaks truth because it's a useful tool. It's really the most powerful tool. So her intelligence stops being mythical and becomes more logistic. And I'll compare her to some other characters in myths later on as I wrap this up. So she doesn't see destinies. She sees patterns. She sees probabilities. She sees human weaknesses. And she feeds those inputs into people who already want to consume that power. So her intellect feels a lot darker, not because it's cruel, but this is that intelligence being employed. And this is also a very important part of that dynamic that we saw of this Oracle. When we talked about 2D, when we talked about D, when we talked about Erica Sinclair, there was always a pay me component to them. Because this character always knows their own self-worth. That's very important to them. Now, the subtle difference is that, D would right off the bat tell you, give me 50 cents, Raj, or whatever amount of money she was. She was a haggler. She always got her money's worth. They're always going to do something. 2D always came with the receipt afterwards. After she told you, when 2D was saying, I told you, there was a receipt that came along with that you owed her for that knowledge that she imparted on you that turned out to be correct. Erica often negotiated right up front. What's in it for me? Standard. So she didn't mince any words. Now, this is where Sage diverges from that because what she wants is never spoken. Now, this is the interesting part because there's always a payment for this. And in this, I'm talking about her relationship with Homelander, who I'm going to get into deeper here in just a moment. But there's a cost. These two are negotiating. And what he does is Homelander's smart enough to know that she wants something out of this scenario too. Something material that works for her. He understands that about that. He's not blind to that. He doesn't know what it is that she wants, and he doesn't care because as long as he's in the top dog position, he's totally comfortable. So it works for both of them. What she gets out of him is this access, right, to all this power and this protector because he's a part of her mechanism now, and she becomes very important to him. So she's within and thus not taking on the damage herself. And this will be very important, but I want to talk about their relationship specifically. Now, Homelander is an absolute force. He's loud, he's visible, he's immediate. Sage is an absolute intellect. And typically in the earliest days of this comic book genre writing, those two systems were always at odds. And we've also always seen those things quietly circling each other. So typically these guys are natural enemies. They know this. Neither one of them is blind to this fact. Now, Homelander, he's got obviously some special abilities. He can kill anyone in the world in seconds if they're in the same room as him. And this is where Sage has some advantages because she's also among the most powerful beings on the planet, but she moves in different ways. She doesn't need to touch you. She doesn't need to physically be around you. She doesn't use weapons. She doesn't need allies in a room. She doesn't need a public confrontation. She operates where gods are weakest, through systems. She has the ability to influence governments, narratives, supply chains, scientific networks, public sentiment. She moves consequences into place and she lets time do what it's going to do. So on paper, when we look at these two, his given weaknesses and her strengths perfectly match up to make her the single greatest threat to him. If there was one person who could coordinate everything they needed structurally to stop Homelander, she would be able to do that. And he recognizes this too. It's not because she is defiant to him, but because she is predictive. She recognizes patterns, and once you see patterns, you don't fight power head up. You make it predictable. And once it's predictable, it can be beaten. You probably remember a line out of the movie, I think it's V for Victory or Vendetta, right? And there's a line where he talks about that chancellor, and he says, there's only one thing that he can do. And once he knew the only move that you can make in a scenario, they can pick you apart. And this is how genius actually survives. Sister Sage forces Homelander to acknowledge very quietly, very unmistakably, that she is smarter than him. They had about 1 or 2 words of dialogue in that vein. But I am smarter than you. But she throws their relationship a lifeline at the exact moment by saying that you're smart enough to realize that I'm smarter than you. So she hands him a gratuity and he accepts it. He takes it because this isn't any type of humiliation, it's containment. She establishes her own relative dominance without threatening his identity, and she preserves his ego while neutralizing his paranoia, which is a brilliant level of manipulation. So she makes her intelligence useful rather than an opposition. And in doing so, she transfers herself from a rival to absolute infrastructure. So that character has moved to within the system now. Now, Homelander understands all this instinctively. Killing her wouldn't make him safer, it would make him blind to all the things that she offers. So without her, he returns to this chaos, his impulse, and these self-sabotage techniques. With her, his violence gains all this coherence. His tantrums gain narrative cover, his brutality starts to look like destiny, and this is why their alliance truly holds. He contains her physically, she contains him structurally, and neither of them benefit from an escalation between the two because they both benefit from this alignment, to the detriment of all the rest of us. This is not what we want to see aligned. Now, mythically, this is kind of an inversion of the classic intelligence versus force conflict, where stories often frame the brain as the internal challenger to the brawn. And this relationship acknowledges a harder truth. Intelligence that refuses to negotiate with power gets crushed by it. Intelligence that understands power can ride it or restrain it gains control. So she doesn't try to overthrow the god. She makes herself indispensable to him. And in doing that, she becomes the one person in the world he can't afford to kill. The oracle whose alliance over prophecy. And this is survival over just martyrdom. It's not weakness. This is the most dangerous position in the room. Because he is a god who doesn't understand himself truly. And she gives him that. So he's going to orbit that. Now, this is the cost. And this is very important because there's always a cost here. And this is where, for her overall abilities, she pays a high price. It's that Sister Sage cannot rest. Not that because she's ambitious, but because her brain won't try to stop solving a world that refuses to change. Like, she sees it all. The lies before it's told, the collapse before it's televised, the manipulation before it's framed as patriotism. So she does the unthinkable in that scenario. She lobotomizes herself. Now, this isn't a joke. It's not a kink. This is mercy for her. It temporarily stupefies the only sleep that's available for her. And it's not madness, right? This is a system that's so hostile to awareness that self-erasure becomes self-care. This is her actually protecting herself. And it's not lost that she does it in this very violent and very intrusive way. Now, that leads us further to talking about her relationship with the deep. This is intimacy at the bottom of the intellectual ocean. This is why it's deep. The deep. This relationship confuses everybody because morally, we read it from this moral standpoint instead of symbolically. She's the smartest woman in the world. She chooses the dumbest man in the seven. Why? Because upstairs he's absolutely silent. He represents cognitive abstinence, right? Cognitive absence. He really has no ambition other than sucking up. He has no grand theories of his own. He has no pattern recognition. Being with him is like floating in an intellectual sensory deprivation chamber. And that's the point. That's the point of what it is. She reminds him of what it feels like to not see anything, to not notice anything. And she will literally destroy parts of her own body in order to tolerate this kind of intimacy. This is not romance. This is indictment. And literally, she both stabs herself in the brain and then kind of allows him to degrade her as a part of the process. And this is a tax that she pays. This is anyone who understands like the ultimate, what it actually means to be this oracle at a meta level, at a soup level. So everything is far more enhanced and it's difficult to deal with it because your psychology doesn't become soup. You still have a normal psychology dealing with all this additional information. Now, looking at her, she really represents this intelligence without exit. She isn't necessarily evil. She's what happens when intelligence doesn't have moral authority. She's power with no self-reflection, and her survival requires cooperation with both of those things. She's this oracle who's stripped of any levels of mysticism, and she's handed a badge. And once that happens, prophecy stops asking what should and start calculating when. So she's the oracle. The oracle hasn't changed. The oracle remains extremely consistent, be it across these multiple characters, but we see her